Hey, well, welcome to September. We are clearly in September. The last videos I posted already this month were recorded in late August, and I'm just so happy to finally have reached September. And why I associate this early part of September around Labor Day with anchors is because, unfortunately, when September begins, you still have 3 weeks or more, a little over 3 weeks of astrological summer. 3 weeks and 2 days to be exact, so it's just 3 weeks. And of course, meteorological summer for us feels like longer than that. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is, a little bit of unboxing, and I hope I have time, and to talk about a similar subject. But this right here, I don't know if I showed that pig. This was something I found at my mom's house. I was not even expecting. It's funny how some of the coolest things I get are completely unexpected. And this, he's like a key fob or something. It was intended as a key ring. Probably, if I had to guess, I'd say he fell off of someone's purse or backpack or keys. Some silly teenage girl probably, has this kind of a key ring for whatever reason, or some high school kid. And he didn't have eyes. He was some kind of a little pig who did not have eyes at all. Just some dots with a marker. And the neck, it was poorly sewn on, was coming off, so I fixed that. The neck, I reinforced the stitching, and I put this little bow tie, a makeshift bow tie, to hide the ugliness of it. When I got to this house, at first my mom, she put it outside hoping it was some kid that would come and find it. But once that didn't work, obviously no one came for it. I just took it home with me, and I fixed it at her house around the neck. And then over here, I washed it by hand along with some dog clothes, dried it, squeezed it real hard, dried it, and then I put 2 blue buttons for the eyes. And so that's a cute little thingy. It could go with one of my dolls. Not really a collector of stuffed animals, but hey, if I can find something and make use of it, then I'm happy about it. The other thing I want to say is that while I was gone, I got 2 packages from AliExpress, and if only I could find the other part of it. I get this cute boy, and what's special about him, his name is Adrian, and he goes with some kind of a ladybug girl with blue hair. It's a little bit shorter, but I really just like Adrian because he was sold without clothing, and he just happens to fit in these small Ken boots and this 70s outfit that I was able to find, this jumpsuit. So he's fully clothed. That's all I really care about. He's about the size of Wendy, though I have a Peter Pan doll that goes with her. But this Adrian guy, he was, some cartoon. And what I like about him is that he is, like so many of the other dolls I like, he's a little below average, more of a Kevin size, like a teenager look. And I like him for that reason. He's a smaller young man. So there's Adrian, and this was a brunette Lottie doll. Let's see, she has a name. But I have the blonde version of Lottie from eBay, and this is a Lottie doll wearing a Chelsea dress and pants, like as if they're an outfit that goes together. But a brunette Lottie doll. Would like to have the boy named Finn, but unfortunately, he goes for way too much. It's not really all that cute, and I don't feel like cutting her hair, so I'd rather just have the brunette Lottie doll. And so that's another thing I got. Another thing that came in the mail was someone from this state, more northern part of this state, was selling these baby dolls that I just couldn't pass up. And I put him in a little construction outfit, but what makes him special is that's just a makeshift thing. He has kind of a defect of sorts, a manufacturing defect. Like, I have drinking wet babies that have a hole, so they clearly look like girls. But this one is odd in that he has a manufacturing defect that makes him almost look anatomically correct, like a boy. It looks like a thing. And so I couldn't pass him up. You know, someone who lived in the state selling a cute doll like that. And I've just loved the way, you know, I love the way he looks like a boy because of that unintended defect. You know, just like a typical drinking wet baby looks like a girl for having a hole. And it's just funny. It's hilarious because of what it looks like it is, a tiny little short you-know-what. He looks like he has a thing sticking out. And I put him in a little construction dress as a top with a diaper. So that's a lot of the things. And I don't know if I showed my seven doors from Temu. And let's see. The other thing from AliExpress was these curtain tiebacks for my curtains, so that if I wanted to have my curtains tied, you know, I could do it that way. But how much I'll use them, we'll see. And this, let's see, where does it open? Can't show the front, but this package right here this is something I've always wanted but never got around to buying. It's Gaston, and this is the antagonist from Beauty and the Beast. I have a Belle and a Prince Adam doll somewhere. I'll have to show them one day. But what I like about him, you see, this shows you how small Adrian is. He's more like a Kevin doll than a Ken doll. And I've always wanted to have a Gaston. You know, and here lately I've been thinking about him. You know, he's a ton of Gaston, get it? So there's a Gaston. And when I was in the 3rd grade, you know, and Beauty and the Beast was new. See, I like how he has a beard and everything. And he has a ponytail. But he's a male antagonist who clearly isn't gay in my mind. I mean, I don't see him as being gay. Now, I guess some people could interpret him that way. You know, for having a ponytail or having a close male friend named LeFou. But I don't see him as being gay because, I mean, he's clearly into Belle and, but yeah, when I was in the 3rd grade and I was obsessed with Beauty and the Beast, I always dreamed of having, like, and maybe I wasn't obsessed with the 1/6 scale. I wish I could have I used to dream of creating my own, like, museum full of mannequins, kind of like the wax museum. And you'd have Belle, kind of like my own Disney World. You'd have Belle, you'd have Prince Adam as a human, who I'll have to show. He's just lighter haired and blue-eyed. And then you'd have all the other characters. See, just like with the other Disney movies, just like the other children's Disney movies, I always hated the fact that if the show was a Disney princess show, you know, primarily about girls, you know, princesses, it always looked to me like younger boys, little boys were especially sidelined or excluded or downplayed in significance. And if it was a show about such characters, you know, such as like, well, the shows that I've talked about on here, The Rescuers, like Sword in the Stone, like, you know, a show that was primarily about little boys and focused on them, they conveniently didn't make any 1/6 fashion dolls. No 1/6 scale fashion dolls were conveniently made. Now, other dolls may have existed. Perhaps there were plushes, perhaps there were tiny action figures on this scale, you know, with non-removable clothing. You know, perhaps there were other representations of the character, but seldomly were they ever fashion dolls with removable clothing of any kind. They were little tiny figures, you know, that were more like 1/12 or smaller sculptures, or they were huge plushes for babies, or they were the character depicted, like in the case of Chip in Beauty and the Beast. They were depicted as, if they existed at all, they were in his teacup form. They were him as a teacup with a teapot mom. They were never Chip the human boy, you know, with blondish hair, which this is not supposed to be Chip. But my point is, it always bothered me that, you know, most, like, the only characters that were really being promoted in such movies were, you know, your princess characters, your one princess in the movie, and perhaps her love interest. You know what I'm saying? He would be the one and only Ken doll, like the Ken of the Barbies, you know what I'm saying? And you might even have other female characters portrayed as dolls. You know, like if there was a female antagonist, or, you know, or a sister, or a girl that was in competition with her, she could be a doll. But male antagonists could only ever be made into dolls if they were adults, which was almost always. And, you know, supporting characters that were little boys were conveniently excluded almost all the time. You know, John and Michael were not part of a Peter Pan set. They didn't make any for the Rescuers or the Rescuers Down Under. Sword in the Stone was too old, you know, for 1/6 scale dolls because they weren't in yet. Barbie hadn't come along. And, you know, it's really hard to think of too many of them, but, you know, Disney princess shows that happen to have little boys on the show rarely made those characters into dolls. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there was a Barbie-like Belle doll, but no Chip and, you know, Lumiere and Cogsworth, although they're men. There was a Barbie scale Ariel, of course, that I've shown. But of course, you know, Flounder never became a human. And if he existed, he was of course a fish, but that was even rare. Flounder and Sebastian. There were no little boys in the Aladdin story. Let's see who else. Sleeping Beauty, of course, you know, they didn't even have a baby version of her. Princess Rory, you know, call her Aurora. They didn't, let's see, what other movies are there? Cinderella, no children there. Snow White, I've shown the dwarfs, which came many years later. So anyway, it seemed like supporting male characters were just kind of left out of the story by and large. And especially if they were not adult size characters. You know, if they were small in any way, or if they were children, you know, like LeFou and Chip and Lumiere and Cogsworth, if their bodies didn't conform to a very, narrow definition of masculinity, you know, that's a counterpart or the complement of the femininity, in the Barbie world, if they couldn't be like a Ken doll or a burly Ken doll, then they just were not made at all. They were excluded in all but a few rare cases, like Anakin Skywalker and, the Jonathan Taylor Thomas Pinocchio, and perhaps the Kevin doll from Home Alone. And that's why those examples stand out so much. That's why they're so memorable. What few celebrity boy dolls ever existed are memorable because they're in such a minority. And of course, the Harry Potter dolls that started with the same bodies as the girls. So I always had this dream, like Martin Luther King, I have a dream. When I was obsessed with Beauty and the Beast around age 9, I used to fantasize about having my own, like, Beauty and the Beast world. Now, would it have been on the 1/6 scale? I don't know, but it certainly wouldn't have been smaller. And I wanted to have, like, a life-size mannequin of Bill and Adam as a human and Gaston. It would have been a really big part of that. And, I hated the ending, where he simply dies. I hate that kind of an ending because it's like what I like in a movie. I like a movie where the antagonist suffers. To me, that's the whole point of the story. It's not to see protagonist win and have a wonderful life. It's to see antagonist freaking suffer. And not so much die. I don't really like tragedies or old-fashioned stories wherein the antagonist simply dies and is never seen or heard from again, and people live happily ever after. And you normally don't see a lot of gory graphic details about their death anyway. You don't, they just fall off a cliff, or something happens, they die, and you never see their body again. You don't see the aftermath. And that's what I really hate. It's not the type of ending that I would want, and it's not, because I want to see antagonists suffer. You know what I'm saying? I want to see them suffer, not die. I don't like, movies wherein, you'll have an original movie, the original antagonist dies and is never seen again. You'll have a sequel and it's a whole new antagonist, and then he or she dies. And then if there's a third one, it would have to be a totally new one. Kind of like, the Sea Witch and the Little Mermaid having a sister, and, just various things like that, wherein the antagonist is gone at the end of the movie and no longer has to suffer. And that's not what I want. I like, a TV series wherein it's the same antagonist suffering in a different way every single time. And, I also like the thought of the trauma being more psychological, you know what I'm saying? Like, I like physical trauma, I like the thought of someone like Lars on Rocket Power being in the hospital, from getting hurt in hockey or skateboarding or something. But I prefer, psychological traumas, like, humiliation is my favorite, because it's like you don't really see the scars on the outside. And it's like they would have to live with that and have no one know why they're sad or despondent the whole rest of their life about something humiliating that happened. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't like the way Beauty and the Beast simply kills your strong male antagonist, which is rare. Straight guys are rarely portrayed as an antagonist, and notice how he doesn't wear purple, he wears red and black, which is so much better. But I hate this association with antagonist and femininity, because they want you to see, the protagonist as being strong and heroic and masculine, like it's masculinity that saves the day. And so because the protagonist has to be strong and masculine, like Superman, which I associate Superman with September because it starts with an S, and the blue birthstone, reminds me of Superman, the sapphire. So, because the protagonist has to be strong and masculine, the antagonist is often written as effeminate, sissified in some way. Though both, the protagonist and the antagonist have a ponytail in Beauty and the Beast. And you could actually say that they both have feminine qualities, though I don't see it that way. I mean, if they're attracted to Belle, if they're both attracted to Belle, then they're not effeminate. They're not gay. Um, so, like a lot of times, they'll give like the protagonist the more masculine qualities and the antagonist the effeminate qualities if he's male. And I don't like that because it's like vilifying femininity. Um, it's just a very homophobic, misogynistic way to look at it. And that has to do with most writers being male. And so yeah, I guess this video is too long and I'll go ahead and post it. That's my unboxing. Happy September.